You can start, sir.
Good afternoon. Welcome to an Exchange for Media talk with leaders of the industry, captains of the industry, people who run large organizations, have a huge impact. Today on this show, we have Ms. Zareen Daruwala, who's the CEO of Standard Chartered Banking Group in India. Welcome, Ms. Daruwala, to this conversation, and thank you for making time. How have you been doing? What's keeping you busy in COVID times? And tell us how's been the journey in the last 55 days as an individual, as a leader, and for the organization that you lead to at the end.
Yeah, so actually, I have really not stepped out of home, literally out of my complex in the last 55 days. But it's been a revelation for me personally. I never thought as a bank we could operate with 90% plus people working from home. And given the fact that banks are really tech savvy, it has really enabled us to ensure that most of our employees have laptops at home and they are enabled to work. We have obviously over time taken a lot of calls locally as to how we'll service customers. For example, customers also are not sometimes able to send mails from their official IDs. They're sending requests for transactions through personal IDs. So we reinvented our processes to ensure that customers really, all the transactions are something that we can seamlessly fulfill. In fact, the lockdown happened on 25th March, and with year-end for customers, salary payments, the period between March 25th and March 31st was really something that high volume of transactions and sudden change of how we were operating. But as a bank, given the fact that we knew our colleagues in China and Hong Kong and Singapore had started, and even Philippines had started the quarantine process, so we had a bit of heads up. So we had actually started moving to maybe 50% work from home before the entire lockdown. And to that extent, there was a bit of preparedness. There was a bit of planning. So we had the benefit of that.
You had a head start on that. Yeah. You talked about how you had become more tech-enabled. You always were, but the digital engagement with customers is increased, enhanced. Tell us, how has the relationship with your banking customers changed, if at all it has changed, and if at all it's changed for the better? So give us some insights into how do you see the new banking relationship with the customer with almost zero people coming into the bank branch. You invested in a huge branch system, ATM system, but it's all become, digitally enabled. So tell us, how's the relationship of a banker and a bank changing with the customers?
So clearly, the last 2-3 months has ensured that we were fairly well penetrated digitally. We have about 70% of our customers who are digitally active. But on the corporate side, we've actually reached 99% plus. And last few weeks has in fact accelerated because customers had no choice but to use our digital internet banking and use all the digital infrastructure that the bank operates. Also, we've ensured that a lot of the service requests we are able to fulfill digitally through a self-service mode. The customer really doesn't need to call the call center. And I think the technology, one thing that was in fact something that we enabled very quickly after the lockdown was the call center, where employees could take calls sitting at their home and even do the recording, which is required statutorily. So that was something, to my mind, that was really technologically quite difficult, but our teams did it very quickly within a day or two of the lockdown. So we were able to service our customers. Having said that, clearly customer volumes on call center was something that was far higher, while branch footfall obviously came down to a trickle. So a lot of the traffic got diverted to the call center. To that extent, for first 1 week, it took a while to adjust. But now we are servicing customers last 7 weeks sitting at home.
So how do you see banking is a little bit about empathy also? So how do you bring empathy in digital transactions? In that change relationship.
So the empathy comes in only if a customer actually has face-to-face contact. But I think what banks are doing, and this is not right now, but last few months or 1 year, is something that banks are working on, which is hyper-personalization using AI and machine learning. So through hyper-personalization, if a customer is used to sort of shopping from a particular store and he's near that store, a message will go, oh, we have this offer on cards, credit cards, and would you like to take it? So that hyper-personalization, which Amazon does beautifully, we see in China, Alibaba, Alipay do it. I think in banking, increasingly, it will work on hyper-personalization because you really can't have too much of physical contact with the customer till this COVID dies down. So that is where I think the customer sensitivity, not bombarding a customer with unwanted SMSs and unwanted messages, but sending something which we believe as a customer, the customer wants.
Fantastic. I think you give fantastic examples of how a bank is dealing with this new paradigm and utilizing technology to serve the needs of the customer. I also want to ask you, have you been watching news? The news viewership has grown by, this session is presented by ABP News. The new news viewership has grown up from 100% to 200%, in some cases 250%, 300%, and across languages, English, Hindi, and the Indian languages. So what's your view on news channels? And have you been watching a lot of news channels?
Not a lot. I'm still the traditional print media person, so I read my newspapers a lot on the e-newspapers. But I think given the fact that people, are the only way of sort of absorbing news is through, news channel, because that's the much more authentic than social media kind of news. So I would like to believe that in this period, people would, and there's a bit of anxiety level, there's a bit of, what next kind of thing. So people would be watching much more of the news. And the fact that some people do have time, not all, not everybody has time, because people are double-hatting domestic work and official work right now.
Fantastic. You're in the thick of the economy. Banking and financial services are the backbone of any economy. Yesterday, the finance minister, and day before yesterday, the prime minister announced this relief package. And we know that there's been a negative impact in the last 60 days on the Indian economy and the global economy. What are your comments on the economy and this package from the finance minister?
So I'll start with the economy. I think we've seen quite a bit of sharp drop. In fact, our internal house view is the GDP will be minus 2% for this year. We saw March, interestingly, despite the lockdown was actually last 7 days, but March itself, the IIP has dropped quite substantially. And April to June, GDP will go down by 22%. That's
right.
A number. If you look at our nominal GDP of 203 lakh crores, 22% drop will be close to 10 lakh crores in the April to June quarter itself. So that's a massive thing. The second thing is the red zones account for 52% of the GDP. So that clearly is hurting the industrial production and the services sector. And if you look at our lockdown, India, I had seen an article of Economist where India is, if one was to take 1 to 100 on the stringency of the lockdown, India is 100 on a scale of 1 to 100. So it was the most severe lockdown that was there. And if we look at the PMI readings, March was 49.3, April was 5.4. So clearly, we really need to look at how we can now kickstart the economy very quickly. Of course, the silver lining was that the oil prices came down, and every $1 of oil reduction per barrel is about $1.5 billion of GDP save, of fiscal deficit reduction. So to that extent, I think India has been a little bit cushioned. About 1% of the GDP will get saved through, because India imports a lot of oil and 1.4 billion barrels. So we will get about, if we look at even $25 save, we have at least $30 billion kind of savings due to oil imports.
Fantastic. And, as you rightly said, and as the finance minister and the prime minister, the MSMEs are really the backbone. And Standard Chartered Bank has been apart from being a large lender and consumer banking, MSMEs also form a part of your portfolio. Tell us, how are you reimagining lending to MSMEs?
So what we took a view internally is that the traditional method of bank assessment of working capital will not work, because there'll be no drawing power or very little drawing power. So what we decided is we look at a cash flow based approach for assessing what is the cash flow shortfall. And to that extent, we'll support our clients. Yesterday's announcement is really, really good, because it achieves many things, because it doesn't put a huge fiscal load on the government in this year, but it ensures that the flow of credit to MSMEs gets accelerated. So if you look at the proposal of 3 lakh crores, there's a 1-year moratorium. So thankfully, the government's fiscal for this year will not get strained. And also one doesn't expect that, the entire 3 lakh crore is going to go wrong or bad. So to that extent, the government has achieved many purposes through this measure. And I think that will really help, because MSMEs contribute to about 30% of the GDP and 50% of exports. 12 crore people associated with MSMEs. So it has a very high impact on the economy. The other good measure, I feel, was the 20,000 crore subordinate debt. So even if an MSME is struggling, actually, it's a very good thing to support, because rather than make them NPAs, it's good to step in and support them in this period. Also,
right.
The equity flow that has been announced, the fund, that also gives, because for banks, you can't give, you need a certain debt equity ratio, and that
right.
fund also will ensure that the MSMEs get the equity that is needed. So I think very good measures for MSME sector.
Fantastic. Thank you for being optimistic, because optimism is a trait that leaders have. While they're realistic about what's happening, most leaders believe that future will be better than today. As a leader, you're the CEO of this large organization. What is your leadership style, and what do you tell yourself so that you can keep yourself calm and prepared for what's happening?
So my leadership style is, I'm very decisive. So I take decisions. And other thing is, I actually, I do a bit of planning. Like I had mentioned earlier, we were anticipating this kind of lockdown, not as severe as we saw it, but we were definitely expecting a lockdown kind of situation. And we planned for it. So I think as leaders, one, you need to be able to plan. Obviously, you don't get it right 100%, but at least if you get it right to a large extent.
You build scenarios, A, B, C.
Yeah. And clearly, that helps in times like this. The second is the decision. I take quick decisions. And the third is I have a can-do attitude. So for me, everything can be done. There's nothing that is impossible. And that's the spirit with which I sort of operate.
Fantastic. When Zareen talks to all the colleagues, what do you tell them? What's your favorite line? Or, some of the mantras that you give them to be able to transfer your leadership to them, to be able to give them positivity. There's a lot of people are frustrated, they're anxious. This is literally the VUCA world. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. What do you tell your colleagues to be able to equip them to deal with what's happening now or in the future better?
So in the lockdown period, I did a big call with all my employees. And one of the things I focused on was how well the bank performed in Jan to March.
Beautiful.
There was
Focus on the positives.
Yeah, and there was no reason for us not to continue the good momentum. Albeit, April and May might be a little subdued, but the good momentum should not sort of the present thing should not wipe out the good work that was done.
Right.
Second issue is about how do you quickly move to resolve if you feel that clients are going to be stressed. You bucket them into clients who are genuine, who need a bit of helping hand, and then clients who you feel are much more deep-rooted problem, and then you have different solutions for different sets of clients. So this is something that we really focused on, and we have a plan as to how we are going to handle different sets of clients, depending on the industry that they belong to, and depending on how severe the coronavirus impact will be.
Okay, beautiful. We are getting, one of the beauty about this digital transformation and the digital enablement that we've become part of our life. We are talking through webinar, you're in your home, I'm in my home, my colleagues who are enabling it are in their home, the audiences are in their home, is the questions, the interactivity. So I want to bring viewers here. There is Tanveer Daswani asking, what will the banks be doing on physical retail branches and all corporate offices for the next 12 months? What will you do there underutilized? Soumyadeep Ghosh is asking, if consumers haven't enough money to buy products or cash flows, they don't have enough money, how will the MSME return the loan? So you're giving the loans, but the businesses are not still getting demand. What do you have to say about that? And then we have more questions.
Yeah, so for the first question, anyway, I think we leave the branches and the offices because the physical distance norms will ensure that 50%, max 50% colleagues can come to office till the virus dies down, because we need to have that minimum few meters distance. So we will need all the physical premises for sure. And even in the branches, customers need, between two customers, you need to keep the physical distance. So we will use all the infrastructure for sure. We don't see ourselves doing anything differently for the next 1 year. In terms of how many employees should be working from home and how many from office, I think it's a function of criticality of the role and also the personal side. If our employees have some, old elderly parents or small children, then we look at that as, people who will work for home for some time and the remaining coming to office. So I think the physical infrastructure is here to stay. In terms of the MSME, the buying part, I think clearly the challenge for the government will be how to revive demand, because even as you address the production side issues, the challenge will be how do you revive demand because of your job insecurity, because of what people have seen. There's a bit of conservatism which has come, and the kind of savings we are seeing in the banking system is huge because customers' flight to safety is already happening. And we're seeing that even the mutual funds are having huge redemption pressure. And good banks, strong banks are getting a lot of flow of deposits. And we've been obviously a big beneficiary of that also. So on the demand side, there are a few things that I've seen other countries do. For example, Germany, post-financial crisis, actually had a scrappage policy to revive the auto industry, which is a big industry in Germany. And even in India, auto industry is
fairly significant, both from a financing side and also from a job creation side, because manufacturing leads to big number of jobs.
So in Germany, what they did was for every car, the German government gave 2,500 euro benefit to the customer. And in 1 year, the auto demand jumped by 40%. Now, those are the kind of interventions that will be needed. For example, recently, we've seen Korea, for example, has set up a $33 billion fund to support industries which they think have got very badly impacted, like shipyards and airlines, and it's the usual sectors which are tourism related, etc. Now, different governments are doing different things to sort of support certain sectors, and even if you have like a 4-month window saying that
Right.
okay, I'm going to reduce the GST for 3 months or 4 months, and it's a special period, you can just quickly kickstart some of that purchasing happening. Similarly, in real estate, we don't see people right now wanting to buy any real estate. So if the government can bring down the stamp duty for a finite period and reduce the ready reckoner rates, that can spur the home purchase. So you will need to also do sharp interventions on the demand side to spur demand, because Indian consumers are very value-seeking consumer, and moment they see value, even if it's for 4-5 months, they will rush in that period, and after that, the momentum continues, is what we've seen.
Beautiful. I think we've got 10 questions. So the reason I'm looking at my screen is I'm looking at the questions, and questions are a good indicator of that people are very engaged in them. So thank you for being specific and giving suggestions that are implementable. So I want to compliment you on for doing that. And there's some questions that we can take them now. What is the biggest lesson that the banking sector has learned from COVID-19? And what do you feel should be the action should be implemented? Prachi Ramani, are the bankers trained to protect themselves from the COVID-19, as they will be dealing with huge crowds as part of money dispensation in the near future? AGV Narayan, do you feel self-reliance by local will affect your business post-COVID, because you're a stand chart? I think that. Dr. Parag Amin, small businesses were worst hit as they do not even have enough reserves to take care of their fixed costs like rent, salaries. Banks too are not very forthcoming in terms of helping them. What is your comment on this? Tanveer Daswani, would you be renegotiating rents on your physical branches? And then more questions. So you're a Standard Chartered bank, though you must tell viewers how long you've been in India. I know that. So you're pretty much an Indian bank. You've been here. Why don't you take them through the journey of Stand Chart just to refresh the history of Stand Chart in India?
So Stand Chart has been in India for 160 years. So
that's right. I want to tell to all the viewers 160 years, because in my first job, in 96, I used to deal with Stand Chart, and I did learn that it was there for so many years. So it was mind-boggling to know that. So it's been around for 160 years in India. I want to emphasize to the person who asked the question.
Yeah. So, Dr. Parag Amin's question, banks are not forthcoming in helping them. I think yesterday's announcement by the FM clearly will ensure that small businesses certainly get credit. And 3 lakh crores is a very large number, because this is over and above. This is the incremental need that will be catered. I think there was a bit of nervousness amongst banks because of the uncertainty of the period of lockdown, as also, if some banks do have their fair share of NPAs, and they were worried about lending further and having much more NPAs. So I think yesterday's measure, to my mind, addresses at least the MSME sectors. I'm sure phase 2 will address certain other industries which have been badly affected. The other question, Mr. Narayan, do you feel self-reliance will affect your business post-COVID? No, I don't think so. We are a very strong local bank. Of course, we do a lot of cross-border trade, but I don't think that will affect our business. We have I would say about 80-90% of our revenues just from local business and a little bit from cross-border business. How do you review the economic package announced yesterday by FM? I would say for the MSME sector, it's really good. Clearly, the kind of banking flow that will go to the sector will, my view, reinvigorate the sector. And given the kind of employment that this sector caters to, it's a very, very needed package. We've seen a lot of other countries also support SMEs. For example, Singapore government has given a 9-month moratorium on, and a lot of Indonesia, many countries have supported SMEs in a big way, given the employment that they give. Are the bankers trained to protect themselves from the COVID-19 as they'll be dealing with huge crowds? Actually, interestingly, the footfall is quite low and people are quite scared. So, people will try and avoid coming to branches as much as possible and use digital channels. UPI, for example, is something that loads of clients are using. In March, UPI had 52 crores of transactions. So, that's the kind of volume UPI is having. So, we are seeing clients increasingly use as much digital. So, and then they'll use the ATMs. Clearly, there is a protocol that banks are already following inside the branches. We do temperature check when a customer walks into a branch. We keep sanitizers. We have the screens so that our employees are not directly exposed to the customer. So there are many precautions banks are already taking. Biggest lesson banking sector has learned from COVID. I think the biggest lesson we've learned is that we can run the bank with 90% sitting at home, which to me, 2 months back, if somebody had said, I would have been not very sure, I would say. But today I can be very sure that we can deliver to customers almost similar levels of services with so many people sitting at home.
Yeah. So, one of the things is I tell myself, never say never. Have an open mind. We don't even know what we don't know. I would say the same. I would be very skeptical who said to me that all the media operations can run from home. I'd say it's not possible. But time has shown us that it is possible. So if I may ask a question that's not there and some of it answers all the questions, it kind of, see, our cover on Monday that hits is a 3C economy. Caring, collaborative, and contactless. Tell us, how do you reimagine your bank in a caring, collaborative, and contactless economy?
So, contactless is something that anyway banks are quite used to because a lot of customers and a lot of volumes of transactions are actually happening contactless. I think caring is about what the bank has done in the last few weeks. For example, our people have actually gone and delivered cash to their house where couples could not come out. Or old people, in fact, to the extent that some of them have even helped them with their grocery and things like that. So I think that little personal touch for people who are not as privileged in terms of their ability, they're handicapped or whatever, I think that is where the bank clearly has, there have been really nice emails that I'm getting from customers. Normally you have a lot of customer complaints, but of late I'm getting a lot of thank you mails. So that shows that the bank has become really more caring in the new, this thing. The third C, sorry, you mentioned was what?
Collaborative. Caring, collaborative, contactless.
So collaborative, I think to my mind, the bank has to be collaborative with the customer and have empathy for what the customer is going through, the business problems, and give a solution and have a solution approach to a customer.
Fantastic. So some of the ideas that you may have implemented in this lockdown may have come from suggestions from the customers, could have, or in future could come, in terms of how the processes work. There are more questions. I want to bring in a senior editor that we have, Mr. Ruhail Amin, and Ruhail wants to ask a question. Can we have Ruhail on the screen? Ruhail is there, or shall I ask Ruhail's question?
So you can ask his question.
Yeah. So, Ruhail wants to know is how will the marketing spends of Standard Chartered Bank change post COVID, or already have they changed? So, how, it's a big brand, but staying top of mind, investing in getting new banking customers. So tell us a little bit about the marketing mix, how it is changing, and what will change and what will stay.
So I think clearly the marketing spends will increase on digital marketing because face-to-face contact with customer will be minimal for the next 1 year or till the COVID dies down. So the whole marketing spends will be much more digital and less on the the TV and that kind of spends for a bank like us, which is because the good thing about digital marketing is after that the fulfillment is also end-to-end digital. So for the customer, the journey is seamless. From the time he shows an interest, suppose in a credit card or a personal loan, the whole fulfillment can be end-to-end digital for the customer.
So one of the things is that not in your stand chart, as you said, the numbers are very healthy, but and I'm not asking about any. So the NPAs in banks have grown, right? By and large. Of course, there are exceptions. And with COVID coming in, will there be job losses in the banking sector, in the financial services sector? Do you see where banks will kind of shrink in the number of people they work with?
At least I don't think so right now. I don't see that happening unless it becomes really dismal even 1 or 2 years later. Because the thing is that as what we've done in our bank, for example, is as we've gone digital, we've actually retrained certain job families and reskilled them and deployed them elsewhere. And to me, banking leaders actually have to focus on reskilling employees, because every time you introduce some technology, the way you do your processes, your everything has to change. And leadership, involves like ensuring that the employees are continuously upgraded and the skills are upgraded. And in fact, we're using this lockdown period to ensure our employees do e-learning, and they do a lot of sort of self-skilling and use this period very judiciously.
Right. Fantastic. There are more questions, and let me take audience questions rather than putting my question. Somebody asked, would you be renegotiating rents on physical premises?
No, we have not renegotiated any rents.
Okay. If you had to make a prediction for the future, what would that be?
I think it's very hard to make a prediction. I don't think I'm equipped to make prediction, but the way I have planned is that 9 or 12 months, clearly COVID is here to stay. And given that scenario, how should we be planning our bank and our employees and our operations? So that is the way I'm looking at internally. But hard to say how, it's quite possible that even if the vaccine is found, by the time you get the whole immunity for most of majority of the people, it's going to be maybe another 1 year. So, it's quite possible that this whole period can be extended. So I think one has to my mind, prepare for the worst in terms of this being an extended period, and how do we plan our lives accordingly. That's the way we are looking at it.
Now, also, Ruhail Amin is again asking, he is our editor on experiential marketing. He says, banks and do a lot of events and activations for customer engagement. How are you planning the reach out in a socially distanced world?
So we have been using webinars already in this lockdown period. So for example, for our wealth customers, we are arranging webinars by calling experts, and the attendance is really good. And I think this is how we'll have to for some time keep on, and obviously emails, but more than emails, we found the response to, we've done about 5 webinars in the last few weeks for our customers, and there's been great response. And that is how I think we'll be doing it for the next few months, to avoid as much physical contact with customers.
Fantastic. Rohit, you have your answer. I want to ask my two last questions. I know the conversation is still 1:15. And if there are more questions, we already have had 19 questions and we try to compress them. One question is, a lot of leaders that I've talked to over the last 4 weeks, they say that COVID is not necessarily a black swan event. It's a gray rhino event. A gray rhino appears more often than a black swan. So tell us, has the behavior change that you see, in your opinion, has become permanent, or we will go back to our old ways? So what is reversible and what is irreversible? And how does it impact banking? And how does it impact brand building?
So I think what is irreversible is the whole digital behavior. Once customers become digitally savvy, we've not seen them go back to their physical ways. So to my mind, that is an irreversible thing. What will reverse is definitely customers going back to malls and cinema halls and doing leisure travel. That will come back for sure, post the virus having died down. But certain...
You believe that? I was talking to an investor. We had a BW Disrupt, which is our startup. And we had Rohit Bhyana of Loomis Partner. He says, I won't invest in travel. I won't invest in restaurants. I won't invest in hospitality as a sector. I will invest in healthcare at home. I'll invest in elderly care. I'll invest in tracing companies.
So that is for the next 1 or 2 years. Do we see that not coming back at all? I don't think so. I think it will come back, maybe 1.5 years later or whatever, but it will come back. But what we've seen is, the digital behavior of customers. Once you're used to buying things online and once you're used to doing your net banking at home or from the convenience of your mobile on the move, you don't change that very often. That's been our own experience. So some behaviors will be irreversible. If you look at Alibaba, actually Alibaba thrived post the crisis, the whole online e-commerce in China. Actually, when crisis comes is when certain behaviors change.
Fantastic. So what you're clearly saying that in the short term, some of the behavior like more digital discovery, engagement, digital fulfillment will become a way of life, but possibly it will be a hybrid model. My last question is, over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we've seen some of the industries become zero revenue. We talked about which one, you know which one. What do you have to say to entrepreneurs? While you may be the CEO of a large bank, you're very entrepreneurial if you're a CEO, you're very intrapreneurial. What do you have to say to entrepreneurs whose businesses have been brought to ground, they are not getting any revenues? How do they reimagine themselves? How do they go into the future?
Actually, I think it's very industry specific how they have to reinvent themselves. So I was interestingly talking to the CEO of a cinema chain, multiplexes chain. And I was quite impressed with the way, they have thought through that post opening. How are they going to do things differently in terms of how will the moviegoers sit, how will things happen, how will you have minimal physical touch, whether it's security checking. So I think promoters have to reinvent their whole thinking to make the customer feel that even if they go for a movie or wherever they go, they are not likely to contract the virus. I think that mindset shift, if the promoter is able to do, then there's hope of kind of getting the business momentum, obviously not to the same level as pre-COVID, but at least to a large extent to survive.
Thank you so much for being real. One of the things I liked about your conversation, you've been specific and real, and of course, optimistic about the future. I want to end by, we still have 4 minutes. I want to end by asking, who are people you look up to? How does Zareen get her inspiration? How do you keep yourself centered? Who are the people you look up to? How do you fill yourself with the right tools, whether it's emotional tool, it's knowledge tool, the technology tools, in this really very changing world, full of flux, very dynamic, you got to learn something new on the go. I was not familiar with Zoom calls. I think it's a way of life like WhatsApping for me, as easy. So tell us who are the people Zareen Daruwala looks up to and why, and how does she keep herself going? How does she reinvent herself?
So I have, over the last few years, really, I find I learn a lot from my customers. And when I say customers, it's not only retail, it's a lot of corporate clients and the CEOs. And I make it a point to stay engaged because I find it very refreshing, even in this period. Every day I speak to 2-3 clients just to understand how are things on the ground, what are they doing differently, and sometimes how some of the clients are handling, the tough decisions also helps me think through or sort of gives me a lot of insights as to how others are dealing with the situation and how I should be dealing with the situation. The second thing is I have a simple attitude. If I don't understand something, I just tell somebody in my office, please explain me, I don't understand it. I have no problems telling I don't understand to anybody. And I think that ensures that, one, you're not too full on yourself or you think you know it all. Day you think you know it all is the day of your downside, because you can't know it all. And the sooner you acknowledge you don't know it and you try and listen to bright minds,
domain experts, specialists.
Domain experts, you learn a lot. So that's how I lead my own self.
And what is your favorite line? Something that you repeat to yourself or you tell your colleagues. Like I tell everyone that, storms don't last, dreams don't perish. I keep telling everyone, your life is about trade-offs. Either you can, eat more or you can be healthy. Either you can be meticulous or you can be not successful in what you want. So what is it that Zareen says to herself and to her colleagues? What's your favorite line or, a saying?
Never say die attitude.
Never say die. So on this note, we'd like to keep our time. We're in the business of time. Every minute, every second costs. So thank you, Zareen Daruwala, for being so positive, real, and authentic on this conversation. We wish Standard Chartered Bank luck. We wish Standard Chartered customers luck. And Standard Chartered is pretty much an, Indian institution, 160 years in India. So we look forward to collaborating with Standard Chartered Bank and in some way enhancing what Standard Chartered does. Thank you for joining the Exchange for Media Pitch Talk, and we look forward to another conversation another time. Thank you. God bless you. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving your valuable time to us. Thank you, sir.